Thank you guys so much for coming out. You could have stayed home on this dreary Tuesday, pop some popcorn, watch Netflix, and you're here to talk about suicide. You guys know how to party. Woo! So for those of you who don't know me, it may be hard to imagine me, this middle-aged woman, as a 5-year-old. If you do know me, that is not a problem at all, because that's pretty much my mental state. You've probably seen me get excited about things like jumbo marshmallows, because I think they're the most necessary, unnecessary thing to keep in your pantry. Anytime I see them, they bring me joy. It just blows my mind. We live in a world where someone went, this marshmallow's good, but what if we made it jumbo? But anyway, if we can put up there the 5-year-old me with the self-inflicted haircut, there you go. Oh. So that's what went to kindergarten, to Mrs. Wagner's class, and now you all know half my passwords. And she took roll call, and she said, if I didn't call your name, raise your hand. I grew up on Long Island. So I raised my hand. What's your name, dear? Jennifer. What's your last name? Sweetheart. Dear, your name is Jennifer Funky? It's actually pronounced funk. There's an E on the end, but we're from a very pretentious part of Long Island, so we dropped the E when we said it. So I was pretty upset because I just learned my name was literally Funky. But my father, Vincent Funk, that was his name, and what he called me all the time was Jennifer Sweetheart. Jennifer Sweetheart, time for bed. Jennifer Sweetheart, time for dinner. Now, if my 4 siblings were here tonight, they would not disagree. I was Vince Funk's favorite child. So you can imagine how devastated I was when, in 1997, he took his own life. There are 2 messages. See, you're a topper, Tony. You get 3 messages. I only have 2. So message number 1, what that beautiful song was in the beginning, we are all God's children. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about my faith path for that. And one of the things that this passage, I've looked it in the Bible. I've searched it, by the way. Nowhere does it say we are all God's adults. We're all God's children for a reason. We're all learning. We're put on this life to question things, to learn things, to go through hardship things. But ultimately, God is love. He is the ultimate parent. And he loves us unconditionally. He wants us to be happy. He wants us to be successful. He loves us unconditionally. Thing number 2 is because there are hardships, because you can't, as a parent, put your kids in a bubble as much as you like, as children of God, we have to ask, seek, knock. So let's talk about some fun suicide facts, kids. So maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. That means 45,000 plus people a year take their own lives. And according to a recent Mayo Clinic study, for every 1 person who takes their life, there are 6 others whose lives are significantly impacted in a bad way. We're talking about mental health. Those people are typically very prone to anxiety and depression. So let's talk about dad's suicide. And the program tonight is why. Why did my father choose to take his own life? And as you're listening, please note that I am not saying he committed suicide. That's something that I hope everyone takes away. And as you hear my father's story and as you think about other people who have taken their lives, we need to stop criminalizing it. People commit suicide for pretty much 3 reasons. They're in a crisis, they're in incredible pain, or they have a significant mental illness that has not been addressed. So my father hit the trifecta. When he took his life at the age of 54, he was in a crisis. His marriage of 28 years had ended. My mother filed for a separation and filed for a restraining order. This happened from the time that this happened to when he took his life. It happened in a blur of a couple of weeks. But what led up to this moment was years in the making. Now, Vince Funk came from a blue-collar town on Long Island, was brilliant. He was that guy who did the New York Times in a pen, the crossword puzzle, and he put himself through college, rose through the banks, became a bank executive, and he even had the New Yorker cartoon belly. I mean, wore the bow tie and everything, had a beautiful house, beautiful wife. He was active in the community, active in the church. But here's the thing. I only know this now, half a lifetime later. For years, we always chalked up his mood swings to his diabetes. Oh, Dad's blood sugar level is low. And we didn't have that after-school special kind of life. I led a pretty good childhood. But I also thought it was really normal for your father to just rage and say verbally abusive things and occasionally get physically violent with those he loved. But there were so many times he was hysterical and kind and loving. It took years for me to realize that he probably suffered from bipolar that was undiagnosed. So when he threw a curtain rod at my mother and it went into her eye and left her with a black eye, after 28 years of marriage, that was the last straw. One of the hardest things that we deal with in this society with mental health is that we say that our message is suicide is preventable. You can stop suicide. But I wasn't able to stop him. And I want to say it, damn if I didn't try. I encouraged him to talk to Father Murphy, which he did, but that was to no avail. I encouraged him to talk to family and friends. Some of my family was mad at him for throwing that curtain rod. I called the suicide hotline, and you know what they told me? He's got to make the call. You can't do that. And I prayed to God, and I got the answer that I didn't want. But we're all God's children. If you can you pull up, there are lots of places that are referred to all God's children, but there's one, the Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Side note, my father, when he was going bald, he liked to refer to himself as Monk Funk. And I'm pretty sure monks transcribe this part because the Spirit himself, that's why I put up, I like to picture the Holy Spirit as the cute little sassy Asian woman from The Shack, the movie. So we're all God's children. And I was in my mid-20s when my father took his life. And I was rocking it. I was making my dad so proud. I was living my dream. I was working in Midtown Manhattan. I was the magazine reporter that I dreamed of. I was working at Sports Illustrated. I had the tall, dark, handsome husband. You didn't hear that, Mike? And things were going great. And I'm the oldest, so I was type A, and I controlled everything. And then I felt abandoned. Dad, how could you leave me? I mean, I knew why, but why would you leave me? I am me, right? I was a child. And as a reporter, I knew that sometimes you have to ask, seek, knock. Can we show that quote? Oh, that's good information. That's for later. Oh, maybe I got too ahead of it. Well, anyway, as a reporter, I know that you can ask questions, and sometimes you get an answer you don't expect. Sometimes you have to ask them, rephrase the answer, ask them again and again because you don't understand the answer. Sometimes you have to fact check it, and sometimes you get that dreaded no comment, decline to comment, ask me later. I wanted answers. Why? I went to the church. I went to Father Murphy afterwards, but that wasn't a help. I lit the candles. That wasn't a help. It was really hard over the past 20-something years, I'll be honest, to go through my faith walk because the church has not always been kind to those who take their lives and those who are left behind. I mean, we're up against centuries of horrible things that have happened. For centuries, churches punished those who took their life. They would how do you punish someone who's already dead? Well, they would drag the body through the streets. They would draw and quarter him, tar and feather, leave the body decomposing by the highway. And the family left behind, sometimes they were imprisoned. Sometimes they were just shunned. So we're up against a lot of bad history. And think about it. I mean, in our society, we're uncomfortable when we say, I'm sorry for your loss, for, I want to downplay other people's deaths, but, I mean, boy, what do you say to somebody who has lost a loved one to suicide, right? I'm sure he's in a better place. No, I'm not sure he's in a better place. I struggled for years with that. Not just the why, but where. Is my God in is Dad in heaven? Is he in purgatory? Is he in the bad place? And I'm not kidding. At times I was like, oh my God, are you in the shower watching me cry about this? I didn't know where he was. And I tried to go to God and religion and friends. And that's another thing. It's really hard to go to your friends, people who will listen, because it's really heavy. And let me tell you, you really find out who your friends are, because there are a lot of people who hung up and did not, they steered clear after this. The church didn't offer any comfort. I even paid a clairvoyant at one point to see if he was okay. And for $150, the answer was, yes, your father is okay. Shocker. I really think the only reason why the Catholic Church buried my dad is because he was a really good tither. Anyway. If I could go back now to the journalist I was 20-something, I'm sure, my family accuses me. They're like, when you meet somebody, Mom, stop interviewing them, stop interrogating them. But I know if I went back to 25-year-old Jennifer and she wanted to sit down with me and interview me, one of the first things I'd tell her is, go get a group. Go find support. You're in New York City. For the love of God, there have got to be some other people who have lost other people to suicide, right? You don't have to do this on your own. You're not weak. This doesn't make you weak. It's okay to cry in front of other people if you don't know them. It's okay to cry outside of the shower. I'd also tell myself some good things, because over the years, I was really hard on myself. And I think a lot of people, I suspect, who've lost a loved one to suicide are really hard on themselves because we think we were not enough. We weren't enough for that father, for that person to stick around, to help work through those hard times. So I tell her, be easy, really, really. You did the best you could. I'd also build Jennifer up a little bit by going, hey, you really learned from your father. You've learned from his mistakes. My father, part of the reason why he met the end that he did was because he wasn't taking care of himself. He wasn't taking care of himself physically. He neglected his diabetes, again, the banker belly. And he didn't seek mental health, and it's not like we didn't know. We had a family member who had mental health issues, and they knew to take my brother, so it's not like he didn't know. He could have done that. I'd also praise me for asking, seeking, knocking, because there were times that I gave up on church. I gave up on organized religion, because it's so easy just to be angry, right, and blame the church. But I kept praying to God, and I kept talking to God, and I kept meeting people who were in churches, and they seemed so much happier, and they had connection. And if you have connection, if you're feeling connected, you're going to raise your chances of not only preventing suicide, but it's going to help you get over the loss of someone's suicide if you're connected with a group or feel a sense of belonging. After I lost my dad, the 20-something, very self-centered, Seinfeld-like Jennifer became a lot more empathetic. I felt people's pain a lot more when they were going through grieving and loss, and I really made a point to reach out to them. And when you're part of a church, when you're part of a community, that's the really neat thing about churches, is that they organize the potluck, and there are those times where there are opportunities where you can give them the hug, not just after that immediate loss, but you can remember a couple of weeks or a couple months later when they're sitting there alone, or just it's a rainy day, or you know they're going through a hard thing. You can ask them really how they're doing and just talk about how they're doing. So that's another great reason to be connected, and that's really helped my faith. That was probably one of the biggest impacts on me. I'm a parent of 2 kids, and it's really scary when you lose somebody to suicide. I mean, I can't tell you how many people told me at the wake and the funeral, "Oh yeah, suicide runs in the family. Oh yeah, you're prone to suicide." Thanks. Try the quiche. Thanks for coming. Whew. The impact it's had on me is I've doubled down on optimism. I'm doubling down on being happy and optimistic. And because I have kids, I would never want to have them go through that pain. Now, I know, again, we're not meant as God's children to go through this life without pain, but I don't want to subject them to that. I want them to feel that they're enough, that I love them unconditionally. And I want to show them how I can get through hard times. I'm also the parent of 2 fur babies. Does anyone have any pets? Woo! All right, so I've got a cat and dog, and our dog is Stosh. And Stosh, they told us he's a black lab. He's got pit in him, and he's dumb as a bag of hair. But I've tried to train him. So he sat on one end of the kitchen, and I've got my treats, and I'm going, stay. And he's doing that thing where he sits down, his butt for like a hot second, then he pops up, and then he comes running over to me, and he wants the treat, and I'm like, all right, stop. You're a good boy. Over this half lifetime of processing my father's death, I've kept focusing that God is love. So in this weird way, this is how I've come around to thinking about my dad's death. God was up there going, Vince, stay. There are people around you, stay. You've got options. But he was in so much pain, he just had to go run into God. And God probably just put his arms around him and said, "Oh, that's a good boy, Vince. That's a good boy." If you know somebody who's lost somebody to suicide, I'd like you to remember this. One of the great gifts you can give them is to either share a good memory of that person who took their life or ask that person about a good memory about them. Because it's really crummy to remember that person for their last dark act, right? I was so happy when my friend Chrissy Engel's dad, Walt Engels, came to the wake. And he came and he's smiling through his tears and he said, "Jennifer, do you remember that father-daughter dance? Can you put up that picture of Jennifer, sweetheart, with Vince? You're gonna love this 80s hair and all the lame." So, it's not there. Oh, too bad. You're missing out. Well, anyway, Walt talked about how he laughed until he cried, how we danced, how Dad jumped off the piano. He was so happy, and that made me happy, and that's what I want to remember my dad for. And because this has been such a heavy topic, I want you to remember I brought jumbo marshmallows because if you're ever down, I want you to remember that somebody came up with this awesome idea. Think big, and there are sweet things in this life. So there you go. There you go. Oh, all right. Hey, who wants jumbos? All right, right here, up front. Do you want one? Woo! All right, I'm gonna go long. I'm going long. Oh, all right.